For this video, I want to talk a little bit about source evaluation. So I'm doing this sample paragraph. I've decided to write about farmers markets. Before I start doing my research, I want to think about, imagine what I might put in that paragraph. That will help me add some search terms to limit the scope a little bit. Of course, I may discover some other information and decide on some other topics as I'm doing my research. But initially, I'm thinking, okay, this is a picture from the Portland Farmers Market, so I want to identify it as a picture as coming from Portland and maybe say a little bit about the farmers market there. I also want to talk about, because with writing about Alice Waters, we're thinking about how farmers markets have grown over the past, I'm not quite sure how many years, 20 or 30 years, or maybe a little bit longer or shorter, about the growth of farmers markets. And then I also want to probably add something about the advantages or benefits of farmers markets. I may also want to look at the downsides, and you could see in the sources that I found a little bit about that as well. So those are some topics that I'm thinking might go into the paragraph. So I did some research. I started with a Google search. I did a Google Scholar search, and then I also looked at in the research databases. I looked on Amazon for some books. I didn't find anything much there, but I did find a variety of sources here, some of which I might decide to use and some of which I might not. So the links are here. To try to speed things up, hopefully, for loading, I've put them here in tabs. So the tabs across the top here go down most of these sources here. So let's look at this first one. This one comes from the Farmers Market Coalition. I look at this initially and I am a little bit wondering of whether bias might be an issue here. If I look at the about here, this is a nonprofit dedicated to strengthening farmers markets across the United States. But really, I'm not doing a paragraph arguing for or against farmers markets. So that issue of bias might not be anything I need to worry about too much. But I look down here to see what information we've got. And this seems quite general, not really that useful. We do have the number of farmers markets has grown from under 2,000 in 1994 to more than 8,600 currently registered. So that's a potentially useful bit of information. I'm looking for some relevant information and some good specific information. And now I start to see in 2010, roughly 15% were open in the winter months. How can I find a farmer's market near me? That's not relevant really for what I'm going to be doing. Farmers markets take only cash, not really concerned about that. But here, with this paragraph, that's where I'm starting to see some information that might be useful. More than 85% of farmers market vendors traveled fewer than 50 miles. Okay, that seems like a useful statistic, and I've got some other information down here. So I think this seems to me, and notice much of this information, there are hyperlinks here to sources. So that gives me a lot of confidence that that this is not, just somebody off the top of their head trying to promote farmers markets, but it's really some researched information that people have taken a good, amount of time to pull together and give these sources. How does the farmers market help my local economy? 2011 Economic Research Service report. So we've got some well-sourced stuff. You do want to check and make sure that these links are active and that they're not bringing you to junk, but we'll just check this one here. Okay, so this is a USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, not found. Okay, so this is a broken link. That may be an issue if you see that a lot, but still, I think this is a usable source, and to farmers markets preserve farmland. So there's quite a bit of information here. There are the specific details and then a variety of different topics. So I think that's a go for that one. The second source I found is web page is from the same site. You can see this is about sustainability, so this has some environmental impact. I didn't see too much of that sort of topic in the first source. Sustainable practices. So this is more general information here, but when we get down to these bullet pointed information, on average, food travels over 1,000 miles from the point of production to the retail store, 27 times less distance for locally sourced produce. 2015, so we do have some fairly recent information talking about the 1 in 4 farmers selling at farmers markets cultivate land that is protected from commercial development. They talk about organic farming, integrated pest management, cover crops, etc. So this may be useful. I'm not sure I'm going to have room to use it in my paragraph, but I think it passes my test, in terms of source quality. Okay, moving along here. Here we get to something on Smithsonian.com, which initially I thought Smithsonian.com, Smithsonian Institute, very reputable, national, international reputation. Farmers markets, Americans love them. So I'm hoping that this has been like a cover story in a Smithsonian magazine or something. So I have a good amount of information. But when I look at the information, we get Susan and Chip Plank. We do get 1.1 billion at more than 2,600 farmers markets. We can see already, if you remember back from the previous source, we were talking about many more farmers markets than that. But then we get just down 4 paragraphs in, like this article, sign up. This is it for the article. Whoops, whoa, shoot. Let's see if I get back where I was. This is it for the article. So it's very short. Even more concerning, getting back to this 2,600, look here at this date, 1999. Now, I know to me that might just seem like yesterday, but that was 20 years ago. So really, if we're looking at farmers markets and how they're trending, and we want some much more current information than this 1999. So this one is out. This one in Oregon Encyclopedia, as you might guess, I got this because I was looking for some particularly Portland information. Portland Encyclopedia, it's a project of the Oregon Historical Society, so I think in terms of credibility, that's a good, it seems like a credible source. We could get some more information here in the About Us to try to verify that. It's an online encyclopedia, apparently, though maybe there's a paper version. So here we're talking particularly about the Portland information. I don't really need a lot of information about Portland. I want to just use it mainly at the beginning of the paragraph to identify it. The modern farmers market movement dates back only to the 1970s. As early as 1873, cities such as Portland established indoor and outdoor venues known as public markets, farmers markets, and municipal markets. Declined significantly. So we have some indication of the history of farmers markets in Portland. It was not until 1998, etc. You can, of course, look at these. If you want to look at these links in more detail, you can, of course, go back to the blog and then just click on the links there and have a chance to read them. I'll be skimming through. If we're looking for specific Portland information, we don't get that. Portland Farmers Market, which now operates 6 markets, was organized in 1992. So we do get that bit of information. So I think this is a credible source. It has a little bit of information about the Portland Farmers Market that might be useful. Okay, this roadfood.com. This is a kind of bloggy looking site done by somebody, Authentic Regional Eats. We have some credibility issues with that. This person is not necessarily an expert in farmers markets. They haven't studied farmers markets particularly. When we get down and look at the source, we have a particular fondness for farmers markets. One of our all-time favorites is the one in Portland. It's more like a review than anything that we're really going to be able to use. It's very personal, an Italian sausage sandwich that they liked. Um, and it's quite short. So again, this is one that I'm going to get rid of as not useful. Okay, this is a source that I believe I found through a farmer's market, through a Google search. I was interested in maybe seeing if there was a downside to farmer's market, so I might have put downside or disadvantages or something like that in the search term. It's from Pacific Standard. This looks like believe this is an online site for a magazine that appears in print. Has some degree of credibility, but it's we've got some information. It's not that long. A lot of my students will settle for sites like this just because it has something about farmers markets and it looks like it might be credible. A lot of times, especially with online sources, one of the great benefits to online sources is the use of hyperlinks. A lot of times, newspaper articles or magazine articles are written in response to reports or research that has been done, more in detail work, and then these people are just reporting on kind of the summary of the results, and you can see that in the bullet points here. So we do get some information. We've got some statistics, but if you're thinking about quality of sources, a much better, if you do have a hyperlink to something like this, what you generally want to do to get a better quality source is to go right to the original source, and the hyperlink will let you do that. This brings me, I've got the link open over here, to this journal Appetite that looks like it's published by Elsevier, which is an academic publisher. So this is an academic journal article. Much more credibility, much more authority than a popular magazine or a popular newspaper. So these are the types of sources that I'm really asking you to see if you can find at least a few for your essay 3. One of the main, as I said in the assignment, one of the main purposes of the assignment is to give you some experience looking for high quality sources. Now, you don't necessarily need all the information you're going to get in a high quality source to actually construct your paragraphs, which have somewhat limited information. But when you're thinking about works cited pages, one of the things to remember is that you're not just finding sources to use in your own writing, you're also providing sources to your reader. So it's very helpful to your reader, a reader who may be interested in your topic, to give some sources that have some more in-depth information as you advance in your college career and career, perhaps occupational career. You may be writing longer pieces where you need the more in-depth information in order to evaluate some issue. But in English 101, what I'd like you to do is to get some experience in thinking about the difference in source quality from the one I just looked at versus this one. Now, the unfortunate thing about this one is that it does not have the whole content of the article available for free. If you really wanted the article, you could track back and see if either BCC or the Boston Public Library has a database that includes this journal Appetites. You could get access is going to let you purchase the article for $36. You don't want to do that. we do have interlibrary loan at BCC, so you could get access to the article for free through interlibrary loan. Again, if you were doing a larger project and had more time, that might be something to consider. But even just looking at this one, we have the abstract. Farmers markets were open substantially fewer, so the months, days, and hours. It offers 26.4 fewer fresh produce items, more expensive. So we do have some information here, and this would be a better source to use to cite rather than the previous source, which was the popular version of this. This paragraph, sentence in particular, is something that, as you'll see later on, I copied out as a possible quotable quote. It does seem to sum up the downside of farmers markets, that they may offer many items not optimal for good nutrition and health, all those sweet bakery things, and carry less varied, less common fresh produce. I saw that in Portland. There was a table of mushrooms, amazingly number of mushrooms and shapes of mushrooms, which was beautiful to look at, but not necessarily the kind of thing I'd want to snap up to cook with. And price and accessibility in terms of hours. Okay, so I think this is a good source. Again, it's got an alternative point of view. It's got some specific information here. And citing this directly from the researchers who wrote the paper is a more valid way to cite your source. Okay, so let's look. I think this is the last one. This one is something I got through the database in the library. This one, I was interested. It was true. A lot of the articles on the databases were very technical and too, not that useful. But this idea of community, farmers markets as nodes for products and community, I hadn't seen too much about that, so that kind of caught my attention. I will point out a couple things about the database. One thing, if you're going to link to a database article, you do not use this link up here. Within the database, that's not the one I want. You can get a link, either called a permalink or a bookmark, or the terms most often used. These are links, and you can see if I click here, it gives me the link. Okay, it should give me the link. I don't know why that's not popping up. I don't know what's going on with that. Anyway, it's that permalink that you want to use if you're linking to something on your blog. To get the full text, we do get the abstract here, but for this one, we're in the database, and we can get the full text here. Oh, okay. Oh my goodness. I think I was in Academic Search Premier. Okay, this is not getting me. Let me go back here and see if I can click in it again. Okay, this gets me here. Let's see if it'll. Okay. So this gets me the article. It's 19 pages long, so it's quite long. Students sometimes come to these articles and they're intimidated by the length of them and by the look of them. It's very dense. There's a lot of words on a page. Remember a couple things. One is you don't need to use the whole article. You don't often need to read the whole article. Our academic articles are usually organized with an abstract at the beginning that's a little summary. There's an introduction here, and there's a conclusion at the end. So often, again, when you get into more advanced courses, you may be looking more carefully at these academic articles. But for the purposes in English 101, what we want to do is introduce you to how to get to these articles, what they look like, and to try to get a little bit comfortable with scanning them and being able to get some usable information. Now, this was particular to Dallas-Fort Worth. So we're not really interested in Dallas-Fort Worth. We want to look and see if we can get some more general information. And then one thing, if you have some time, you might want to look through this article a little bit. It's not as bad as it looks. When you get into the statistics and the data and everything in the middle of the article, yes, that's a little dense. But the beginning, I think, has some quite usable stuff. In particular, this sentence I thought was a really potentially useful one, increasingly popular among foodies who place high value on food quality. The movement also focuses on taste, origin, the environment, and the humane treatment of animals. So I thought that kind of sums up some of the benefits of farmers markets. This came from another source, the information. If you were citing this source, sometimes students think they need to get readers to this source and they have to give this nonini source. You just have to get your reader to the source that you used, and then it's the responsibility of this writer to get them to the original source. So at the end of this paper, there's a reference list. This is APA rather than MLA. I can tell because I see a date, which is a sign of an APA citation. But the bibliographic information to find the source would be there. You would just cite this article that you've got here. The proliferation of farmers markets in recent decades and their spatial distribution illustrates the popularity and spatial extent of local food movements. Okay, that's a little more than we need. We do get this information here about how farmers markets have grown from 1994 to 2012, 2013. Not tremendously up to date, but it beats the 1999 that we got in another source. So there's some information there that might be useful. If I skim down here, methods, I don't really care again about Dallas-Fort Worth. Skim down here to the end. There's a conclusion. These markets, which form important nodes of the networks that create local food systems, continue to provide both producers and consumers with a unique locality where place and community are conceived and created. Community can be linked to the local food movement and should be considered central to the function of farmers markets. This one I think is a nice sentence. Again, it's probably not going to be something that is going to fit in my paragraph, but these communities are created because farmers markets are places where producers, consumers, and neighbors come together to talk about food, connect with each other over products grown from the surrounding landscape, and delight in the experience of the market. It's a kind of nicely written sentence. Okay, and here we can see the nonini if we go down here. Okay, so I just want to show you something about the range of sources from short, popular sources to longer, more academic sources. To show you how sometimes you can start with the popular source, the newspaper article, and find a link that'll bring you to the more in-depth source. I'm not expecting all of your sources to look like this, but I hope that they don't all look like those first few short ones that we looked at. So if you haven't had a chance to get into the database to play around and see what you can find, I'd encourage you to do that. Google Scholar is a good place to go that is sort of a intermediate step between the databases and Google. It does have Google's ability to put in quite a few terms in a search box. It has the nice feature now on the right in Google Scholar of seeing which of the articles we have available in our BCC databases. I'm not sure that feature is working from home if you're not signed into your account. I'll try to check on that. But certainly if you're hooked into the BCC network, you'll see that. Okay, so that's it for source evaluation. I'm going to be working on my paragraph. I may do a video, or I may just put some notes on the paragraph with some things I'd like to point out to you. Remember, this is a rough draft that's due Sunday. Do the best you can. You don't have to necessarily have all 6 of your paragraphs written in order to post something. Pay attention to source quality. I'll put some tips for integrating information from the sources a little bit later down in this post on more on SA1.